Hey everybody, DM Jim here. Welcome to a new episode of the Tabletop Engineer. A few weeks ago, I was at the MACE convention in North Carolina, and I had a chance to sit down with a lot of different people and talk about games that we were playing and things like that. There was one individual, and I don't want to embarrass him here, so I won't say his name, but you know who you are. We started talking about Dungeons & Dragons. He was a new player, and he expressed to me that he was a little nervous. He had a bunch of friends that wanted to start playing D&D who had never played before. He had played a few times, and he recognized that he was going to need to probably be the dungeon master. But not only just the dungeon master, he was going to need to be able to teach them the rules of D&D from zero. They knew nothing. So we started talking about it, and I gave him some advice. And I'm no pro DM, but I'm comfortable in the DM's chair, and I'm comfortable with new players at the table. But I felt his stress. So I told him to hang tight. I was going to go home, and I was going to put together a video, this video, with some of my thoughts, not so much thoughts, but my actual resources that I would reach for and use if I were a new dungeon master or a new D&D player. So in this episode, I am going to introduce you to 5 resources that I have selected that I believe would be useful for a new dungeon master and for new players. Let's go take a look. This is called the Explorer's Pack. You'll notice some dice and cards in this little Ziploc bag. I will put a link to this in the comments below, but I want to show you how this works. It's really well done. It's only $5 plus shipping, depending on how fast you want to get it. All right, so what do you get? You get 6 dice. They are color-coded, as you can see here. Blue for the 12, red for the 6. The 10-sided is black, 20 is white, the 4-sided is yellow, and the 8-sided is green. Now, this is important. One of the things that a lot of new D&D players have trouble with is trying to figure out which die to use for certain roles, right? Okay, so next thing I want to show is inside here are these little stickers. See these? They're color-coded as well. There are 3 of each color. You can probably figure out where this is going. All right, so one of the cards, it's really sort of a cheat sheet. It tells you that which die is associated with which color. It tells you how to read the die, because remember, some of these dies have like a 0 on it. Is that a 10 or is that a 0? We all know that's a 10, but new players, they don't always know that. For the 4-sided die, for example, they don't always know how to read it, and there are different types of D4s. There are some where the number is on the top of the die at the pointy part, and there's some where it's at the base. This one is the number rolled is at the base. So it actually tells you one number is right side up, if you can't remember that. So it's the only number that you can read correctly on the tabletop. On the back side is information about combat, the order of combat, and the different things that you can do on your turn. Notice how small it is. You also have gameplay essentials, which is it has some stuff about skills, saving throws, ability modifiers. This little card right here has enough information on it combined with this one that the new player is not going to feel overwhelmed or should be able to quickly figure out what they need. It's all there on 2 little cards. The final card, and this is really slick, is called the micro character sheet. But the micro character sheet right there, as you can see, it's not a lot to it, but there doesn't have to be. There's a place to put in your modifiers for the abilities, armor class, hit points, inspiration, your proficiency bonus, the number of hit dice you have, and then up to 2 pieces of armor and 2 weapons, and then some lines here for extra information. A lot of times, that character sheet, that 5e character sheet, can be a little overwhelming to a new player. There's just so much on it. They've distilled the most important stuff down onto this one little card here. And now, this is where the stickers come in. So, if you look right here, you'll see 2 small circles right there. So, for the damage, you could put the color there to tell you which die to roll for the damage. You could also do it for like saving throws if you wanted to. On the other one, where was it? You can use the stickers to identify the rolls you need. Again, it's nothing real advanced here, but $5. You get 3 cards, a handful of little stickers, and 6 of the dice. And if you're a DM, you could buy 1 or 2 of these, keep them in your bag, and when you have a new player show up at your table, this is a little donation that you could make, and hopefully it will simplify the game and gain Dungeons and Dragons a new player. All right, so that's it. It's called the Explorers Pack, and again, I'll put a link to where you can buy this below. $5 plus whatever shipping choice you make. This is called The Hidden Halls of Hazakor. It is a softback book. Let me see how many pages. 75 pages. And this was a Kickstarter that I supported a while back. I believe part 2 is currently being kickstarted. But it says it's an adventure for beginning game masters and first level characters. Can you see that? Now, keep in mind, for beginning game masters, this is the interesting point also for players. This is a full-fledged adventure, start to finish. But what the author, Scott Fitzgerald Gray, has done here is he has created an adventure that the GM does not need to have run an adventure before. If the DM sits down and reads through the book, what they will find is a number of sidebars. You know what sidebars are. They're these little boxes that appear in addition to the basic text. Of course, things are color-coded, as you can see. Text you read is in yellow. DM text is in black and white. But what's interesting about this book is, as a new DM, there are a lot of concepts that you need to have in your head when you're running the game. Advantage, disadvantage, DC saves, checks. The list goes on. There are so many things running through a DM's mind. What's cool here is all of those concepts that a DM has to have a really solid grasp on, they are presented sort of as you encounter them. So if you're playing the adventure, reading the adventure starting out, at some point early in the adventure, it talks about NPCs, and then there's a sidebar that tells you what an NPC is and why they're important and maybe how you want to play them. Further in the book, there will be sidebars on selling things that occur sort of maybe when you're in the bazaar area or needing to buy stuff. Let's see, rest and relaxation. There's a mention of that. My point is that the DM, the new DM who's inexperienced, this book is sort of a hand-holding adventure. It's not dumbed down at all. It is a full-fledged adventure. And what's really interesting about it is it's broken into 2 parts. There is Purdy's Rest right here, which is like a castle, a keep, that can act as the player's home base. And then there is the dungeon, which I'm going to flash up here real quick just to show you. Notice the color coding. Color coding is important because this dungeon is divided up in such a way that the players are not going to be able to access other parts of the dungeon too soon. It means your level 1 characters, your new players who are just trying to get used to the roles and the rules, they're not going to be able to explore an area of the dungeon that could kill them or that may rely on some advanced game mechanics. Instead, there's a really interesting way that the author locks them into their section before they can level up and move on to another section. The other thing is this dungeon is not meant to be run in one setting. It's meant to be run so that the players go into a certain section, do something, and then head back to Purdy's Rest for rest, maybe to get some clues or information from NPCs, maybe sell some items or buy some items and things like that. When this adventure is done, the players will be up to level 5. I won't say you can't make a mistake, but it's a very forgiving adventure, and without giving away any secrets, that's about all I can say, is that it's well written, it's a fun little dungeon, some great NPCs in here, some really cool surprises. It's just when it fell into my hands, when I backed it and got the book and I sat down and read it, I was just so blown away by how well this book can introduce Dungeons and Dragons to new GMs, new DMs, and new players. So, Hidden Halls of Hazakor. Okay, again, I'll put the information below so you can go find this. These are called the Young Adventurer's Guides. Do not let their small size fool you. This one is called Monsters and Creatures. This one is Warriors and Weapons. And there are two more coming out at the end of 2019. One is called Wizards and Spells. The other is called Dungeons and Tombs. These are full color books. The artwork is just incredible. I'll just show you some examples. I'll include some close-up photos and some video of some of the spreads in here. But full disclosure, the artwork in these books is done by a guy named Aaron. He owns a company called Conceptopolis with his wife. He and his wife also own a company called Jetpack 7, which I do some writing for. So full disclosure there, but these I had no hand in, and I am happy to recommend these. And let me tell you a little bit about them. All right, first off, they are called the Young Adventurers Guides. They're sort of meant to appeal to a younger audience, maybe age 12 or even 10 or higher. They introduce the basic concepts of Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition. This one, for example, talks about the races and the classes and the armor and weapons that are available in the game. This one talks about the different creatures that players would encounter, and it's not comprehensive. You're not going to find, obviously in a book that thin, you're not going to find every monster covered. What they've done is they've picked out some of them, just the biggest, baddest ones: dragons, mind flayers, beholders, that kind of thing. And they give them sort of a little more detailed spread. Here's the centaur one, just so you know. They're usually 2 or 3 page spreads. Here's the displacer beast, okay? So it's interesting. Unlike the monster manual, it'll have an image, and then instead of a stat block, you get some call-outs to the creature's special abilities. You also get some advice. Do this when encountering the creature. Don't do that when encountering the creature. Now, if that sounds simplistic and childlike, maybe it is, but I will tell you, I read these cover to cover, and as an adult, if I were getting into D&D, I would want these handed to me so I could read them, because they take the larger, advanced concept of the game, the rules, all the nitpicky stuff, and they sort of push it aside. There's very little mention of mechanics and things like that, but what they do is they tell you what the game is about, what you'll be playing, who you'll be fighting, and I assume the spells in the Dungeons book will show you some of the locales that you will be investigating as an adventurer. Hands down, if you had put these two books in my hand as a kid, I would have said, where and when can I play Dungeons & Dragons? I mean, these would have lit the fire in me, because they are just so well done. They are selling very well, so I'll be honest. You may have a hard time finding these. I looked the other day in the bookstore, and the copies they had are gone. I also looked at one of the gaming stores, and I think they had this one, but not this one. So they may be a little hard to find. I'm sure they'll reprint them, but when they were released earlier this year, they made a big noise. A lot of people liked them because, again, they take the larger D&D books that we're all used to, and they consolidate them down into what are going to be 4 hardbound. These are hardbacks. 4 hardbound books that divide up the game into categories that are a little more digestible and easier to understand. Now, I only have these 2 to go on, but if I were to pick one of these to give to a new player, obviously I would choose Warriors and Weapons. It does skip over the spellcasters. It talks about the rogue, the ranger, paladin, fighter. It doesn't. This book doesn't have all the classes, so they're leaving some for other books, I assume. But this one actually does cover just creatures from the D&D world. I cannot recommend them enough. For a new player or a new DM, these are definitely worth having on your shelf. The artwork is unique. It's unique to these books. It was created again by Conceptopolis. So there's some really outstanding artwork in here for flavor that you could hold up for, say, NPCs. I mean, look at that. It's beautiful. I will put a link again below with the names and titles of these books and where you can possibly find them. They list for $12.99 on the cover, but of course you can probably find them cheaper than that online. So again, the Young Adventurer series, book 1, book 2, I'm not sure which one came first. I think they were released at the same time. They're not numbered, and 2 more coming out before the end of 2019. There you go. This is called Return of the Lazy Dungeon Master. It is by Michael Shea, and I have to tell you, he goes by the name of Sly Flourish. He has a website. I'll put the information below. But this has to be one of the most valuable resources I have as a DM, and I'll tell you why. Most dungeon masters have to put in a certain amount of preparation time before a session. Now, there are DMs out there who do seat-of-the-pants games where they just show up and they just, off the top of their head, they're just running a game. I am not that kind of DM, and most of the DMs that I know do not do that. Most of the DMs I know, and myself included, have to put in a certain amount of time ahead of the game to prepare for it. Now, some DMs will put in maybe a half an hour for every 1 hour of gameplay. Some will put in the inverse. Some will put in 2 or 3 hours of prep time for each 1 hour of gameplay time. For me, it's about 1-to-1. I'll spend about an hour for each 1 hour of game time, maybe a little less. Why a little less? Because I'm using some cheats. I call them cheats, but they're just good information. Return of the Lazy Dungeon Master, as you can see, it's a very thin book, paperback. It is 95 pages long, so you can read this in one sitting. Now, it does make some assumptions. It makes some assumptions that you've run probably at least one game as a DM, okay? So if you're a novice DM, this is not the book you want to start with, but it is a book you might want to consider reaching for after you run that first session or maybe the first 2 sessions, because you will understand the concepts explained in here. Now, what Mike does is he breaks the book down into 8 steps. Perform these 8 steps, and they will help you reduce the prep time for your game. And he's totally correct. I have followed this process and been surprised, amazed, that I was spending less time in the prep time. But what's funny is each one of those 8 steps, for example, step 1 is review the characters. Those are what the players are doing. Step 2, create a strong start. Step 3, outline potential scenes. Each one of these steps gets its own chapter in here, complete with examples and a really good explanation for, what that simple step. There's a lot of meaning behind each of those very short, simple steps. But what's funny is when you're done, you get to chapter 12, which is called Reduce the Checklist. He reduces it even more to 3 absolutely must-have steps. If you are going to be a DM, use those 8 steps. But if you're really in a hurry, these are the 3 you can use to really streamline the prep time experience, not the game. You're not shortening the game. You're shortening the amount of time you spend preparing. Now, what's really interesting about this book is there are some charts and things in here that you can reference. And if you find this very useful, there is a workbook that goes along with this. I don't know if the workbook is available in print. I have it in digital. But in that workbook are actual charts that you can fill out. And then there are other charts that he has created that sort of replace charts in the Dungeon Master's Guide. It's not saying that the Dungeon Master's Guide is wrong. What he's saying is, for example, there's a chart in that workbook that helps you pick the right amount of creatures for the right amounts of players. Now, the DM's Guide says, assume there's 4 players, they're all level 3, well, then you're safe to take on a CR3 creature. As a Dungeon Master, we all know that the CR system is sometimes a little wonky. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. I'm not going to give it away, but Michael Shea has in that workbook one of the most accurate charts that I've ever found that sort of replaces that CR ratings chart that the DM Dungeon Master Guide promotes, and he offers advice on truly balancing a combat scenario using the levels of the players you have and then the quantity and CR level of the monsters. And all I can tell you is I'm sold. When I first found the workbook, I tried it a few games or in a few sessions in combat, and it was perfectly balanced. My players didn't find the battle too easy. They didn't find it extremely deadly. It was right there on the razor's edge. So this is another resource that I cannot recommend highly enough. Return of the Lazy Dungeon Master. Now, keep in mind, this is a follow-up to a book called The Lazy Dungeon Master. That is a good book, but there is a lot of stuff in here that sort of supersedes that. If you're going to get the one or the other, get this one. Okay, this is the more up-to-date one, and in my opinion, and I have the other one. I have the Lazy DM. It's much better, much better. And if you get this and you like it, then you absolutely must get the Return to the Lazy Dungeon Master workbook. Again, I'll put links below so that you can go out and find these. The last resource that I'm going to recommend is probably one that makes the most sense. And you're probably going to be going, I already know about that. But believe it or not, there are a lot of people out there who want to play D&D, but who are not aware of the D&D Essentials Kit. I was not going to buy this. I bought the starter set back in 2014 when Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition came out, and it was okay. The adventure in it was good. I had been a DM before. I knew the rules basically of Dungeons & Dragons, and that kit got me up to speed on the changes in mechanics and stuff for 5e. But for a new DM and new players, Wizards of the Coast really knocked it out of the park, in my opinion, when earlier this year they released this Essentials Kit. Now, originally you could only get this at Target, and I know that irritated a lot of people, but you can get it now. It's sold everywhere, and they've printed them in such quantities you're not going to have trouble finding it. What's even better about this is the price. You can typically find this box set for under $20. Sometimes you can find it on sale for around $12 to $15, not counting shipping. It's an incredible price if you can get it for below $20, because what you get in this box, hands down, is what every beginning DM and every novice player or new player to D&D should have. Let me show you what it comes with. All right, first the basics. It comes with dice. All right, these are not cheap dice. Now, they're not high quality, high expensive dice, but they're not like the dice that those of us who remember D&D years ago would come with, where the numbers would scratch out and you'd have to rub a crayon in them. These are good beginner's dice, and what's even better is they come in one color. You do get a poster in here of the land, the Sword Coast. You get this fold-out map here, which is kind of nice. And on the flip side is a map of Fandalin, which is the adventure where the adventure that comes in this book takes place. You get this rule book. It is 64 pages. 64 pages right here. Very easy to read. It's laid out in a very similar format to like the Player's Handbook or the Dungeon Master's Guide. But if you're a new DM or a new player, this is where you want to start. A lot of players and a lot of DMs are going to be absolutely overwhelmed if you hand them a Dungeon Master's Guide or a Player's Handbook. Granted, those books are laid out very well, and they're written very well, and they're easy to follow. But they're easy to follow if you know what an RPG is, if you've played D&D before. But if you've never played the game before, if you have only the smallest of ideas about what the game is about, those books can overwhelm. This book is not. This book, I've read it. I mean, I know D&D, but I sat down and I read it just because I wanted to understand what did they strip away from 5e to make this nice little thin book. And the answer is they didn't strip away a lot. The races are here. The classes are here. The spells. What's going on here is this game is tailored for levels 1 to 5. So imagine that. Take the DM's Guide, take the Player's Handbook, take the Monster Manual, and strip out anything that would probably be way beyond level 4 or 5, and you could get the book down to a reasonable length. This rule book can be read in one sitting, and it does not overwhelm the reader. And when I read it, I was reading it as like, okay, pretend you know nothing about Dungeons & Dragons. Would this book entice me to play? Yes. Is it easy to follow? Yes. Does it cover the rules, the mechanics of Dungeons & Dragons? And it does. If there's anything missing from it in terms of mechanics, I am not recalling it at this time. Now, in addition to the rulebook, for all you new DMs, you get the Dragon of Ice Spire Peak, this adventure right here. This adventure it's a good adventure, okay? If you are going to run this adventure as a new DM, it's laid out in a way that you shouldn't have no problems running it if you've read it. But this, again, is very much like the other resource I recommended, the Halls of Hazakor, which is this one has sidebars that explain things. It gives you text to read, just like most standard adventures do. But it's perfect in the sense that there's a new mechanic in here that I've not seen in other 5e content. You have to complete certain quests before you gain permission or you gain a level or an item or whatever to go accept another quest. So again, just like the Hazakor book, it prevents new players from getting in over their head, and it prevents DMs from allowing them to get in over their head. If the DM reads this book, it specifically tells you you need to finish this quest and maybe one more before you can go on to the follow-up quests. Now, how do you track that? Glad you asked. They give you quest cards. I'm not going to flip it over so that I won't give anything away, but they give you these quest cards, and on the back, I'm just going to flip it real quick. On the back is all the quests that are in the adventure. You can separate these and then give them to the players. Now, a lot of new players don't know, or many advanced players don't do. What they don't do is they don't take notes. You know, if the DM's reading something, a lot of my players are writing down almost every word I say. They think there's a clue in everything I say, and sometimes there is. But what these quest cards do is they allow the DM to remind the player, you're on this quest, and these quest cards usually contain the payment that the players will get or the heroes will get when they complete the quest, and it also contains just enough detail so that they can stay on point. They know what they're supposed to do, they know what they're supposed to accomplish, and get their reward. So in addition to the quest cards, it also comes with magic item cards. These are magic items that are not overly powerful. They're not going to break the game like some of the magic items in the Dungeon Master's Guide. A new DM does not need to worry about giving a magic item to a player that is going to be way too powerful. These cards control that. 1, 2, 3, 4. There are 4 cards with 9 each, so 36 magic items. And no, you will not be giving all 36 magic items to your players during this particular game. These are just options that they might find or buy or be rewarded. Next thing you get are these NPC cards. All right. So a lot of times new DMs have trouble with NPCs, like describing what they look like or getting into character with them. And I'm guilty of this. I don't really sink into my NPCs and become the NPC with accents and mannerisms and things like that. But I could totally get into this. Popping a little card on the table. This is what Galandro looks like. And on the back, it tells you a little bit about Galandro, about their personality and a flaw and their ideals and things like that. These are perfect for a new DM. Now, again, the DM has a lot to remember in the game, and I still have trouble remembering all of the different types of damage that can be done to a character. I forget all of the different types of conditions. Well, there are condition cards: charmed, deafened, blinded. There are 2 of these, okay? And you can see some of these are combat cards for initiative. But all of the conditions are right here on a card. So if somebody becomes restrained, you can give them that card. If somebody becomes stunned, you can give them that card. It helps both the novice DM and it helps the new player. And on the back, it explains what the limitations are when you have that condition. If you're prone, it tells you a prone creature's only movement is to crawl. The creature has disadvantage on attacks. An attack roll against it has advantage if the creature is within 5 feet. So the player with this card knows exactly what's going on and what kind of disadvantages they're at when they have this condition put on them. And then finally, you have some initiative cards. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Initiative is one of those things that the DMs will always struggle with. Not necessarily struggle, but getting all the players to roll their dice and trying to remember who goes next. You've got initiative cards. You could put this number, they can put it out in front of them, and the DM can go, okay, player number, who's up next? Number 2, who's up next? Number 3. You can assign these to monsters. Keep numbers back when a creature has an initiative roll that's somewhere in the middle. What else do we have in here? Well, this is kind of cool. I don't like a big DM screen. I don't even use a Dungeon Master screen. But for a novice DM, I still recommend learning to play the game with a DM screen because You can keep your notes behind it so the players won't see what you're doing. You can roll your dice behind it without the players knowing what you're doing. You make a mistake, no one knows it but you because you're behind this little DM screen. Now, I like this DM screen because it's short. Most DM screens are somewhat a little taller, and this one's nice. And on the inside, it gives you, as a novice DM, it gives you the various actions that a player can take in combat. It gives you the different conditions, as I mentioned. I forget those all the time. It gives you values for weapons and, let's see, what else? Costs for food and lodging, travel times for distances, the skills and various abilities that are associated with them. It's all here, inside here, for a new DM to keep track of. There's this little box here that you can make into to hold all those cards that come with it. And then finally, if I can get it out here, you get a stack of the players' character sheets. Now, one thing that I really wish had come with the Essentials kit is some pre-gen characters, like a pre-rolled fighter and a pre-rolled wizard. It doesn't do that, but those are easy enough to get online. If you just do a Google search for pre-generated 5e characters, you will find resources online that you can just print those as you needed. But it kind of would have been nice in the kit to have one for each of the classes, at least, not necessarily the race, but vary them up, but have one pre-gen for each class. But not a big deal. All in all, though, this has got to be pretty much and it's called the Essentials Kit. This is the essential resource for new DMs and new players, in my opinion. You can't go wrong with it. There you go. Those are the 5 resources that I would recommend to a novice DM and a novice player who are just getting into D&D. Now, I know that there's going to be some disagreements out there, and I welcome your comments. Maybe I forgot something, or maybe you have something better. Somebody's inevitably going to say, yeah, but you forgot to mention the player's handbook. No, there are certain things that are a given to play D&D, and a Dungeon Master's Guide and a player's handbook and those kind of things, a monster manual, those are necessary. What I'm wanting to do is offer up to novice DMs and novice players, or new DMs, new players, just some extra things that they may not know about that can help them get into the game and really enjoy it. So you've got your Explorer's Kit and the dice. You've got your Young Adventurer's Guides, the Halls of Hazakor Adventure, Sly Flourish's Return of the Dungeon Master, and of course, the most essential, the Essentials Kit. Any of these or all of these are going to help a new DM and or a new player really enjoy the game and get into it. That's all I got. I'll see you next week. Take care.